Cameron Ellis stood silently, watching through the frosted glass of the small cafe. Dressed in a faded blue janitor's uniform with a cheap plastic name tag that simply read Cam, he looked like just another working man wrapping up a long shift. But beneath that modest exterior was someone entirely different. A man who had once walked the polished floors of executive suites, pitched to high-profile investors, and hadn't worn anything under 3 digits in price for years. Now, he was pushing a mop like a ghost in his own kingdom. The uniform had cost him just $24.99 at a discount store, and it itched uncomfortably against his skin. But that was nothing compared to the weight in his chest. For 3 nights straight he hadn't slept, not because of the numbers in the quarterly reports, those still looked great on paper, but because of the employee reviews. Scattered comments, tiny red flags, unclear wages, disappearing shifts, constant staff turnover, and this was one of their highest performing locations. So what was really going on? The executive board had laughed it off. A few even cracked jokes. Young people these days, they want a paycheck and a parade, someone scoffed. But Cameron didn't. Because Brew and Branch wasn't just a business to him, it was his soul's work. A dream that had once been mocked by every bank he pitched to. He'd mortgaged his tiny condo 12 years ago to start it, from a humble kiosk on a street corner where he brewed the first cups himself. Every cup poured with purpose wasn't just a slogan. It had been his compass from the very beginning. And now, here he was at Location 14, living inside his own dream, but from a different vantage point. Beneath the disguise of a janitor, Cameron was beginning to see what the reports had missed. The cold detachment behind polite smiles. The performative kindness. The hollow charm. "Hey, new guy!" A voice snapped him out of his thoughts. It was Brad Wilcox, the branch manager, leaning lazily on the counter, eyes glued to his phone. His Brew and Branch apron was spotless, unlike Cameron's deliberately stained one. "When you're done with the floors, check the men's room. Some kid played chemistry with the hand soap." "Got it," Cameron replied, lowering his voice to blend in. The irony wasn't lost on him, being ordered around by a man who couldn't be bothered to look up from his screen. Brad had a knack for turning on the charm, especially around customers and young female baristas, but treated everyone else like furniture. Cameron had been quietly observing him for 3 days now, and the more he watched, the more disappointed he became. But then something unusual caught his attention. Viewing a young woman, not like the others. Her name, according to the schedule posted in the break room, was Noelle Chin, late 20s, composed and steady even during the chaotic afternoon rush. She didn't complain, didn't zone out between orders, didn't waste movements. She approached her job with a kind of quiet reverence, as if each latte was a matter of personal pride. "Grande oat milk latte, extra shot for Melissa," she called, her voice clear and kind as she slid the cup across the counter. The customer, a frazzled woman with a toddler on her hip, visibly relaxed the moment she took her first sip, an unspoken thank you passing between them. In just 3 days of watching, Cameron had begun to read a different kind of data, the kind that couldn't be plotted on a graph. The unspoken respect the younger baristas had for Noelle, despite her not being a manager. The way she stepped in when customer interactions started to go sideways. The care she showed to the elderly man who came in every day at 3:15 for a small black coffee, always guiding him gently to his usual seat by the window. But what truly captivated Cameron was what happened after the cafe closed. The first night, he thought it was just coincidence that Noelle stayed late. The second, he grew curious. By the third, he was certain. While Brad bolted out the door with his favorite staff members, Noelle lingered. She double-checked equipment, re-cleaned areas the closing crew had skipped, and then she disappeared into the back office. Alone. Tonight, Cameron deliberately mopped slowly, Inching toward the hallway that led to the office and storage rooms, the cafe was now empty except for the two of them. From a distance, he could hear Noelle humming softly as she reconciled the register. "All done for the night?" he asked, causing her to jump slightly. "Oh, I didn't realize anyone was still here," she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentle smile. "Just finishing up a few things. You don't have to wait for me." "No rush," Cameron shrugged casually. "Nowhere else I need to be." He wasn't lying. Since his divorce 3 years ago, his upscale downtown condo had become more of a sterile crash pad than a home. 60-hour work weeks had taken a toll on any personal life he might have had. Friends, mostly just business contacts, people who vanished the moment he stopped footing the bill. Noelle nodded and began gathering her things. "Well, good night, Cam." Cameron feigned focus on a stubborn stain. His ears tuned to every sound. He waited for the click of the back door, but instead he heard something else. The metallic twist of a key turning in a lock. His curiosity surged. Abandoning his mop, he crept toward the office. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for him to see Noelle kneeling in front of the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. She glanced over her shoulder. Cameron ducked back behind the wall. Holding his breath, he watched through a sliver of space. She pulled out a small key, unlocked the drawer, and opened it with a faint metallic creak. From his vantage point, he couldn't see what was inside, but her face, serene, almost reverent, told him this wasn't theft. This was something else. When she stood, he quickly returned to his mop, whistling aimlessly. Seconds later, she emerged, her bag slightly fuller, her face carrying a complex mix of resolve and sorrow. "Good night, for real this time," she said softly, and disappeared through the exit. "Good night," Cameron replied, watching the door swing shut behind her. He stood there alone, in the very cafe he had built from nothing, feeling like a stranger in his own creation. What was Noelle hiding in that locked drawer? Or more accurately, what was she protecting? Cameron Ellis had made a career out of calculated risk and instinct, and every fiber of both was now screaming at him that the truth behind Cafe Number 14 wouldn't be found in spreadsheets or profit margins. It was hidden in that drawer, and in the quiet determination he saw in Noel Chin's eyes. He removed his old apron. The decision had been made. Tomorrow he'd start digging deeper, not as Cameron Ellis, CEO, but as Cam, the invisible janitor, the one nobody bothered to hide anything from. As he walked the 3 blocks back to his parked car, still keeping up appearances, Cameron felt something stir in him, something he hadn't felt in years. He felt alive. Something was happening at this cafe, something real, something worth risking for. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, what kept him awake at night wasn't the profit margins. It was justice. "Everyone seems pretty close," Cameron remarked casually, glancing toward the group of employees laughing together near the register. Tyler smirked. "Brad's fan club. They get the good shifts, the long breaks, but don't get on the king's bad side." Then his gaze shifted to Noelle, who was gently arranging pastries in the display case with precise, deliberate motions. "Noel's different. She keeps to herself, but she's solid. Remembers every regular's order. People joke she's the cafe's guardian angel." "Guardian angel," Cameron repeated. Tyler shrugged. "She's always fixing stuff no one else notices. Trains the new hires when Brad can't be bothered. Make sure everyone gets their breaks. Oh, and Jenna says Noelle sticks her nose where it doesn't belong. Probably because Noelle caught her skimming from the register last month." The conversation ended as a new wave of customers flooded in, but Cameron had gotten what he needed, a starting point. Throughout the day, he collected more fragments, offhand comments that slowly began to form a fuller picture. "Noelle, she's great," said Marco. the weekend shift lead, while restocking toilet paper. Brad tried to write me up for being late during that snowstorm. Noelle pulled the security footage to show I was outside shoveling the walkway for 20 minutes before opening. Jenna, on the other hand, wasn't a fan. She acts like she owns the place, always watching everyone, like she's waiting for someone to mess up. It's super annoying. By sunset, Cameron's back ached from 9 hours of mopping and hauling supplies, but his mind was sharp. He volunteered to take out the trash, timing it just right to catch Brad leaving. "Make sure you lock up," Brad called over his shoulder, "and get the new guy to finish the bathrooms." Once Brad's BMW pulled out of the lot, Cameron returned inside and approached the counter. "Need any help?" Noelle looked up, surprised. "You're still here? You've been working since we opened." "So have you," Cameron replied, leaning on his mop. "Double shift," she said with a tired but gentle smile. "But I'm fine. You can go if you're done." "Just a few more things," Cameron replied, lying slightly. He'd finished his tasks hours ago, but it wasn't the floors keeping him here. It was the quiet pull of curiosity growing stronger in his chest. He needed to know what she was doing. He moved slowly, cleaning in deliberate silence, listening closely for every sound. 15 minutes later, he heard it, the familiar footsteps, steady and deliberate, followed by the soft rattle of keys in a lock. Moving like a shadow, Cameron slipped from the bathroom and into the dim hallway. Just like the night before, Noelle unlocked the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, but this time he positioned himself to see clearly. Her hands were counting bills, not a lot, just small denominations, and what stunned him was where they came from. The daisy-painted ceramic mug she kept at her station, her tip jar, her own money. She slid the bills into an envelope, sealed it, and scribbled something on the front. Her every move held a strange reverence, like she was performing a private ritual, not just going through motions. As she stood to leave, Cameron quietly retreated to the supply closet, heart pounding like a teenager caught sneaking out. Through a narrow crack in the door, he watched her lock the drawer, check her watch, and head out. Only once she was fully gone did Cameron make his move. Without hesitation, he walked straight to the filing cabinet. Locked, of course. But after 12 years as a CEO, surprise audits had taught him a few tricks. He pulled a paper clip from his shirt pocket, bent it with care, and within seconds, click, the lock gave way. Inside, a stack of envelopes lay neatly arranged, each one marked in Noel's neat, rounded handwriting with a name and a week. The top envelope, Elena M., week 14. The name didn't ring any bells. Cameron didn't touch a thing. He gently closed the drawer and locked it again. But now, whatever Noel was doing, it wasn't just her secret anymore. It had become part of his story too. The next morning, Cameron arrived before opening. Brad was already there, hunched over the desk, eyes glued to his laptop. "I'm taking out the trash," Cameron said, grabbing a mop bucket. "Whatever," Brad muttered, not bothering to look up. Cameron moved slowly, pretending to fumble with supplies while his eyes scanned like a hawk. On Brad's screen, no surprise, was Facebook. When Brad's phone rang and he stepped out to take the call, Cameron seized the moment. He slipped behind the desk. The laptop hadn't locked yet. Wasting no time, Cameron navigated to the company's internal system. Still logged in under Brad's name, he pulled up the HR files, active employees, former employees, and found her. Elena Martinez, barista, shift lead, terminated 3 months ago. Visa cash handling violation. Cameron clenched his jaw. Any termination involving money was supposed to be flagged and escalated for corporate review. Yet he'd seen nothing. Worse, when he checked payroll records, there was no record of severance, no final paycheck, nothing. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Cameron exited the screen just as Brad walked back in. I told you to take out the trash. On it, Cameron replied, but his mind was racing. Elena fired for stealing, no due process, no compensation, and now Noelle, an ordinary barista, was quietly using her own tips to support this woman? The real question was no longer what did Elena do. It was enough. What had she uncovered? Whatever was inside that locked drawer wasn't just a small secret. It was evidence of a buried injustice. Cameron's day off, at least officially, found him not at his luxurious penthouse or in his downtown office, but sitting in a modest rental car parked across from Cafe Number 14. His laptop sat open in the passenger seat, connected to the company's server, a treasure trove he knew like the back of his hand. He dove into the security footage archives, scrolling back to the time of Elena's termination, and there it was, 7:43 p.m., 3 months ago. The footage showed Elena, a petite woman with dark hair and a tidy bun, counting the register. Brad stood across from her, arms crossed, expression tight. There was no audio, but the body language spoke volumes. Accusatory, tense, cornered. He skipped forward. The next day, Elena arrived. She was led into the office and emerged 20 minutes later with a small box of belongings. Her eyes were red. Cash handling violation, Cameron muttered, or someone else's theft. He opened the sales reports and matched them with the cash logs. Sure enough, there was a shortage that day, $157.43. But something didn't add up. He scanned the transaction history and spotted its 5 voided transactions. All large orders, all during Brad's shift. A classic scam: take cash, void the order, pocket the difference. Unbelievable, Cameron whispered. Then, the gut punch. He found a formal complaint filed by Elena to HR a week before her termination. She accused Brad of manipulating schedules so certain employees wouldn't qualify for benefits. The complaint had never left Brad's inbox. Elena wasn't a thief. She was simply someone brave enough to speak the truth, and for that, she'd been set up. But what about Noelle? Did she know everything, or just part of it? Cameron closed his laptop and checked the time, 3:15 p.m., right on schedule for when Noelle usually ended her shift. For the first time, he felt genuinely grateful for the power he held, not to protect the system, but to expose what was corrupting it from the inside. There was nothing suspicious in Noelle's records, just an address in a modest apartment complex about a 15-minute drive from the cafe. Cameron parked a block away, his heart heavy with a mix of guilt and responsibility. He didn't like the idea of following someone, especially not an employee who had shown him rare courage, but he also knew that truth, especially the kind buried by power, never revealed itself on its own. At 3:42 p.m., Noelle walked out of Brew and Branch, the daisy-painted ceramic tip jar tucked inside her bag. But instead of heading home, she walked 6 blocks to a small neighborhood grocery store. 20 minutes later, she emerged carrying 2 full bags. No car, just brisk, purposeful steps. Cameron followed at a distance. Her destination, an aging apartment complex with peeling paint and a warped security door that looked like it hadn't been fixed since the 90s. But Noelle didn't go inside. She set the bags down by a ground floor window, knocked gently on the glass, then stepped back onto the sidewalk. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Elena Martinez. Unmistakable. She looked thinner than she had in the security footage, her face lined with fatigue and worry. But what stopped Cameron cold was the small shadow hiding behind her legs. A child, no older than 5. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Elena wasn't just a wrongfully fired employee. She was a single mother, struggling to survive after having her livelihood ripped away. And Noelle, she wasn't just delivering groceries. She was offering something far more sacred: trust. She was turning her daily tip money, dollar by dollar, into a lifeline in a world that had turned cold and indifferent. Cameron sat silently in his car long after the two women had disappeared from view. A hollow ache bloomed in his chest, quietly flooding the pride he once felt. He had prided himself on building an ethical company, one that stood apart in a service industry rife with exploitation. But here, in one of his own branches, a manager had framed and fired a single mom, and the system he believed in had failed to catch it. For the first time in his career, Cameron felt something foreign and weighty: shame. The next day he returned to Cafe number 14 in the same worn janitor's uniform. But his eyes had changed. Everything was sharper now. He saw Brad arrogantly take credit for a display Noel had arranged. He saw the uncomfortable glances exchanged when Brad publicly criticized another barista. He saw Noel standing off to the side, watching, not out of fear, but out of intent. She was remembering, documenting. During a lull in the morning rush, Cameron pretended to mop near Noel's station. "Mind if I ask you something, Noel?" he said softly. She looked up from cleaning the espresso machine. "Of course, Cam. How long have you been with Bruin Branch?" 3 years, she replied. "Started at the downtown location, transferred here about 8 months ago." Cameron nodded. "Right after Elena had been fired. You like working here?" Something flickered in Noel's eyes, a flash of caution. "It has its moments." "It heard something happened before someone got fired for stealing?" Her hand froze mid-wipe. "Where did you hear that?" "People talk," Cameron said with a shrug. "Jenna mentioned someone named Elena." That moment, Noel's eyes hardened, not with fear but with fierce conviction, like a warrior standing her ground in the middle of a storm. "Elena didn't steal anything," she said, voice soft but unshakable. "She was the most honest person here." Cameron was about to respond when Brad's sharp voice cut in. "In Noel's office now." Cameron watched her walk away, tension rising as the office door slammed shut behind them. He edged closer, pretending to empty the hallway trash. Inside, Brad's voice was firm, laced with control. "How many times do I have to tell you not to bring up past employees? That's none of your business." Asked. "I answered," Noel replied, steady as ever. Brad's tone dropped, venomous. "Lena Martinez got what she deserved. You want to stir up trouble. Don't be surprised if your hours start disappearing too. Got it?" When Noel emerged, her expression hadn't changed, but her hands trembled slightly as she tied her apron back on. Cameron approached as Brad walked away. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Noel looked him dead in the eyes, and for a split second, her professional mask slipped. What Cameron saw underneath took his breath away, a wave of emotion, anger, resilience, and a courage that left him awed. "No," she said, barely above a whisper. "But I will be." As she walked away, head held high, spine unshaken, Cameron knew, more clearly than ever, that the locked drawer didn't just hold envelopes. It held evidence. Receipts, incidents, patterns of injustice no one had cared to see, not collected for praise or promotion, but because someone had to do what was right, even if no one ever noticed. And in that moment, amid the hum of espresso machines and the scent of roasted beans, Cameron Ellis, CEO, self-made success, realized something he'd never learned in a boardroom. The greatest lessons in leadership don't come from business school. They come from people like Noel, the ones who stand alone in silence, choosing what's right over what's easy, and justice over personal gain. By the second week of his undercover stint as Cam the janitor, Cameron had nearly faded into the scenery, present yet invisible. Like many service workers dismissed by those who thought themselves above, Brad barely acknowledged him anymore, except to point out what needed to be cleaned. That suited Cameron just fine. Invisibility was the safest cloak he had. But after his talk with Noelle, something had changed. The air felt different. Brad was watching Noelle more closely now, nitpicking every move she made. It started small, mocking her latte art in front of customers, but quickly escalated into erratic shift assignments and brutal turnarounds that left her no time to breathe. "Brad acting weird lately?" Cameron asked Tyler one quiet moment while they were restocking shelves in the back room. Tyler glanced around before replying, voice low. "He's totally on a warpath with Noelle. Yesterday, he made her remake an entire batch of cold brew 'cause he said it was too bitter. I tried it. It was fine." "Any idea why?" Cameron asked. Tyler shrugged. "Jenna was bragging about catching Brad going through Noelle's locker while she was on her break. Said he was looking for evidence or something." Cameron clenched his jaw. Brad wasn't suspicious of the undercover CEO. He was suspicious of the woman quietly holding him accountable. That afternoon, right during peak hours, the espresso machine suddenly malfunctioned. Brad immediately turned on Noelle, the last person who had used it. "I followed the maintenance schedule exactly," Noelle said, her voice steady despite the growing line of increasingly impatient customers. "Clearly you didn't," Brad snapped. "Now we're down an espresso machine until the repair guy gets here tomorrow. Fantastic." He stormed off to try and smooth things over with customers. Cameron caught Noelle's eye and gave her a subtle nod toward the back storage room. She hesitated, then followed. Once the door closed behind them, he leaned in and whispered, "I can fix it." Noelle gave him a skeptical look. "The espresso machine?" Brad already called someone. "Trust me," Cameron replied. "I used to work as a barista before this." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. What he couldn't say was that he had helped design that exact model when Brew and Branch expanded, working side by side with engineers to ensure it was efficient, durable, and easy to service. He knew the machine inside and out. "Well, would you help me?" Noelle asked, her eyes betraying exhaustion. He paused, "Because Brad's targeting you, and we both know this isn't really about espresso." There was a moment of silence between them, charged with understanding. Then Noelle nodded. "I'll distract him. You've got about 10 minutes. He only needed 7. The issue turned out to be basic sabotage. Someone had deliberately loosened the water connection and adjusted the pressure valve to the wrong setting. Cameron fixed both, cleaned the machine, and was back mopping the floor just as Brad returned. 20 minutes later, Noelle tested the espresso machine, and it purred back to life, flawless. "No way," Brad muttered, staring in disbelief as Noelle pulled a perfect shot. "Maybe it just needed a reset," she offered, her tone calm, free of mockery. The look Brad shot her would have made a lesser person flinch. "Or maybe someone's playing games." Noelle didn't blink. "No games, Brad. I'm just doing my job." The tension in the cafe was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cameron wasn't the only one who noticed. The other staff had begun giving Brad a wide berth, exchanging knowing glances when he walked by. The quiet respect Noelle had built over months was finally starting to bear fruit. Small acts of solidarity followed. Marco accidentally corrected the printed schedule when he noticed Brad had slashed Noelle's hours. Tyler volunteered to handle closing duties when Brad made Noelle do a full inventory count, something that should have been Brad's responsibility. But Brad didn't let up. Supplies from Noelle's station started disappearing. Her locker was randomly inspected 3 times in 1 week, and the most blatant act? Her last paycheck vanished. "Weird," Brad said, feigning surprise. "Must have gotten lost in the mail or something." Cameron had seen enough. That night, after the cafe closed, he logged into the corporate system from his phone and manually authorized a paycheck to be deposited into Noelle's account, a function reserved only for emergencies. He added a 15% processing error compensation as a quiet apology. The next day, Brad's face was beet red. Corporate had called. He stormed over to where Noel was clocking in. "Someone filed a payroll complaint," he barked. "I just asked where my check was," Noel replied evenly. "Isn't that standard procedure?" "Drop the innocent act," Brad hissed. "You've been gunning for my position for months, keeping your little notes, logging extra hours no one asked for. You think I'm stupid?" "No one said you were," she replied softly, her face flushed, but her voice unwavering. Cameron stood nearby, pretending to mop, but his body was taut, bracing for impact. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" Brad shouted. "Your little visits to Elena, the papers in your locker. You're building something, aren't you? It ends now." The entire cafe froze. Customers stopped mid-sip. Employees held their breath. Truth cracked through the carefully constructed facade like a fault line in plaster. Noel lifted her head. Her voice was calm, but steel threaded through every syllable. "You're making a scene, Brad." "A scene?" Brad laughed bitterly, but the sound was hollow. "Sweetheart, you haven't seen a scene. You're just a barista who thinks she's special because she can pour hearts into foam." His voice rose, venomous. "You want to know why Elena really got fired? She was a thief. Couldn't balance a drawer to save her life. And you, Noel, you're heading the same way." But this time, Noel didn't stay silent. For the first time since Cameron had started watching her, the composure she usually wore like armor cracked. What broke through was pure, righteous fury, sharp, undeniable, and long overdue. "You framed Elena," Noel shot back, cutting through Brad's rant like a blade. "She found out you were skimming from the register and you built a whole fake case just to take her down." Brad's face turned white. "You can't prove that." "Really?" Noel said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Because I can." She turned and strode toward the office, her every step burning with purpose. Brad followed, panic rising. "What do you think you're doing?" "Getting the key to the drawer," she said without looking back. "The one you think I don't know you've been trying to open for weeks." Cameron moved quickly, stepping in front of her. Noel stopped short, eyes wide with surprise and confusion. "Camu," she whispered, her voice trembling from pent-up emotion. "I can't let you do this," Cameron replied softly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, embossed employee ID. Cameron Ellis, Chief Executive Officer, Bruin Branch. Their eyes met. "It's time," he said. Someone in power actually listened. The staff meeting was called for 8 a.m. sharp the next morning, before the cafe opened. Cameron stood at the front of the small back room, dressed for the first time in 2 weeks in his usual attire, tailored charcoal slacks and a crisp navy button-down, worlds apart from the coffee-stained janitor's shirt. One by one, the employees filed into the room, confused and whispering among themselves. The last to enter was Brad. He froze in the doorway the moment he saw Cameron standing beside the regional manager, Marcus, both of them wearing expressions as hard as stone. "What the hell is this?" Brad stammered. "Good morning," Cameron said, his voice calm and commanding, the voice of a leader who had addressed hundreds of boardrooms. "I think it's time I introduce myself properly. I'm Cameron Ellis, CEO of Bruin Branch." The room seemed to hold its breath. Tyler's jaw dropped. Jenna went pale. Only Noelle, seated in the corner, remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. "For the past 2 weeks," Cameron continued, "I've been working alongside you under the name Cam, the janitor. This wasn't a stunt. It wasn't for a TV show or some PR campaign. I did it because anonymous reports about serious issues at this location kept surfacing, and they never made it to corporate." Brad forced a smile. Mr. Ellis, if I had known you were coming, I would have prepared. Better cover up, Cameron cut in coolly, which is exactly why I didn't announce my visit. Sir, if you'd just let me explain. There's no need, Cameron said, his tone now iron. I've seen enough. Manipulated schedules, misappropriated funds, falsified termination records. Each accusation landed like a punch, draining the color from Brad's face. But what disappoints me most, Cameron went on, is the culture of fear you've cultivated, where an employee like Noelle felt she had to secretly document every violation because the system I built failed to protect her. All eyes turned to Noelle. She straightened in her seat, as if a weight had just been lifted from her shoulders. This is ridiculous, Brad yelled. Whatever she told you, she didn't have to tell me anything, Cameron interrupted. I saw it with my own eyes. He turned to Marcus. The office key, please. The staff silently followed as Cameron unlocked the office door. No one stood near Brad anymore. The arrogance had completely drained from him. At the filing cabinet, Cameron knelt, inserted the key, and pulled open the bottom drawer. He lifted out a thick folder. This, he said, is what integrity looks like. Inside were photocopies of voided receipts that didn't match the register, tampered schedules, written statements from former employees who'd been intimidated into silence. And then there were the envelopes, carefully collected from tip money, each labeled with a name, a week, and a quiet act of hope. This one, Cameron said, holding up a specific envelope, is from Elena. M. Week 14. A single mother wrongfully accused. Fired without due process. Lost her job, her home, nearly everything. He looked Brad in the eye. Elena was also the one who submitted a complaint about you cutting hours to prevent employees from qualifying for benefits. No way, you can't possibly believe. And this, Cameron said, pulling out a handwritten letter, is Elena's account. Every detail of your theft laid out clearly. She never sent it, because she was scared no one would believe her. She had a child to protect. The room was dead silent. Brad Wilcox, you are hereby terminated, effective immediately. Marcus will escort you out, change the safe codes, and deactivate your system access. Brad began to tremble, muttering incomprehensibly, This is a mistake. The mistake, Cameron said flatly, was allowing someone like you to operate unchecked for this long. Brad was led out, not a manager, not a man in charge, but a faded shadow of someone who had abused his power for too long. Once the room was empty again, Cameron turned to the remaining team. I owe all of you an apology, especially those directly harmed by Brad's actions. We will be auditing this location. Every lost hour, every denied benefit, and every ounce of dignity taken will be returned. He looked to Noelle. Michin, please stay. Everyone else, take the day off with full pay. Tomorrow we reopen with interim management. As the room emptied, only Cameron and Noelle remained. I owe you the biggest apology, he said softly. You did what I should have done. Stood up for justice. Noel looked him in the eye. I just did what needed to be done. And you risked your job to do it, Cameron replied. He drew a breath. I'd like to offer you the manager position at this branch. You've more than earned it. Noel shook her head. I appreciate that, but no. Cameron blinked, genuinely surprised. May I ask why? Because I didn't do this for promotion, she said firmly. I did it because it was right. Elena has a 5-year-old son. She lost her job, her home. What Brad did wasn't just wrong. It was cruel. Cameron stood silently, facing the woman he had once thought was just a barista. Then what do you want, Noel? Name it. Justice, she replied without hesitation. Not just for Elena, but systemic change, so this never happens again. She paused, then added, I want Elena reinstated, with full back pay and benefits. Cameron nodded slowly. Done. I'll call her today. He extended his hand. Noel shook it firmly, without pause. As their eyes met, Cameron realized something his years in executive meetings had never taught him. True leadership isn't about titles or authority. It's about mutual respect between people willing to stand for what's right. Look, Cam Moore thing, Cameron said, voice low but resolute. I still believe Brew and Branch needs you in leadership, but not as a branch manager. Noel tilted her head, her guarded gaze softening into curiosity. I'm listening. What if, he asked, we redesigned our entire approach to employee advocacy from the ground up? For the first time since they'd met, Noel smiled fully. Not the kind reserved for customers, but a real smile. One that carried hope, trust. Sounds, she said. Sounds like justice. 6 months later, Cameron stood in the renovated lobby of Brew and Branch headquarters, which now looked nothing like it once had. The cold, impersonal security desk had been replaced by a working cafe counter, where executives took shifts making drinks alongside newly promoted baristas. The sterile corporate art had been swapped out for candid photos from all 37 branches nationwide. Today was the official launch of the Employee Advocacy Program, the product of 6 relentless months of work. As employees passed by, many nodded respectfully to the woman standing next to Cameron, Noel Chin, now officially titled Employee Advocacy Consultant, her new business card still crisp. Nervous? Cameron asked softly as they entered the meeting room. Noel adjusted the lapel of her blazer, her coffee-stained apron now a thing of the past. A little, but this change is necessary. Unnecessary change, Cameron echoed. The regional managers were already gathered. Throughout the presentation, Noel introduced the new system, anonymous reporting that bypassed direct supervisors, unannounced internal audits, employee-led councils at each location with direct access to HR, and most critically, a fair termination process requiring 3 levels of approval before being finalized. Cameron scanned the room and spotted a familiar face in the back row. Elena Martinez, now a district trainer. She gave him a small nod, gratitude and resolve in her eyes. He nodded back, then stepped to the podium. 6 months ago, he began. I realized the company I built had failed to protect its most valuable asset, its people. I was too focused on growth, on profits, on outpacing competitors, and I lost sight of what Brew and Branch was really about. It's not just coffee, it's community. He gestured for Noel to step up beside him. It was Noel Chin, he continued, who reminded me of that. Not with grand speeches, but with action. With the courage to stand up for someone who had no voice. Noel stepped forward, her voice gentle but unwavering. This program, she said, isn't a revolution. It's a return to the core values this company was founded on. Accountability, respect, and community. Cameron noticed a few managers shifting uncomfortably, those he'd need to keep an eye on. But most nodded, some even exhaled visibly, as if relieved. Clearly, many had seen the problems but never felt empowered to act. After the presentation, as attendees broke into discussion groups, Cameron quietly slipped out. He had somewhere he needed to be. The apartment complex, where he had once followed Noel, looked different now. The walls had been freshly painted, the security door replaced. Not magic, but action. Brew and Branch had purchased the building, renovated it, and kept the rent affordable for current residents. Elena opened the door. Surprise flickered. Then she smiled. Mr. Ellis, I thought you'd be at the meeting. It's going well, he said. I just wanted to stop by for a moment. The apartment was modest but warm. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. From the bedroom, a child's laughter rang out. Miguel's playing with his new building blocks, Elena said, nodding toward the company's care package. Cameron sat down, unsure. I just wanted to check in. see how you're doing." Elia nodded. "I'm doing great. The trainer role suits me, and the schedule lets me be home when Miguel gets back from school." "That's good," Cameron said with a small smile, then added more quietly, "I also wanted to apologize. Again." Elena waved it off. "It wasn't your fault. Brad fooled a lot of people. But I created the environment that allowed him to operate," Cameron admitted. Elena looked at him thoughtfully, then said, "You know what Noelle said the first time she brought groceries to me?" She said, "The system may have failed you, but people aren't the system." I didn't get it then, but I do now. A small figure appeared in the doorway. Miguel, clutching a tiny dinosaur, eyeing Cameron with curiosity. "Are you the coffee man?" Cameron laughed. "I guess I am. But my mom makes it better," Miguel declared proudly. "Believe it," Cameron replied, standing, "and now she's teaching everyone else how to do it right." On the drive back to headquarters, Cameron felt lighter than he had in months. The company was changing, not perfectly, but in the right direction. Profits had taken a temporary dip due to back pay and the cost of implementing the new program, but applications were up, turnover had plummeted, and customer satisfaction was climbing steadily. His phone buzzed. A message from Noel. "Meeting went well. Managers are on board. When are you coming back?" He typed quickly. "On my way, not as the CEO, as the backup barista for the afternoon training shift." He'd made it a practice at spending at least one day each month working alongside staff, not in disguise, not undercover, just as Cameron Ellis, who once was Cam, the janitor, a man who had once felt invisible, and who never wanted to forget that feeling again. As he pulled into the corporate parking garage, his gaze lingered on a seemingly insignificant detail, an old locked drawer. The same drawer that had once been suspected of hiding wrongdoing. But instead it had safeguarded something else entirely, silent integrity. And Cameron realized this system they were building still wasn't perfect. There would be other Brads, more challenges, but now people like Noel and Olena had a voice. And most importantly, someone was finally listening. Not all drawers hide wrongdoing, Cameron thought as he turned off the ignition. Some hold justice. The real question is, do you care enough to open them? And if you haven't already, subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe that the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting to rise.